Hey there, what's going on, everybody? Cheers. So, happy Friday on this last Friday of June 2022. And can't believe the year is actually almost half over now that we're thinking about that. But stages of change is something that we wanted to talk about. And like usually we think about these about 1 or 2 months in advance, and like that is something that we're coming up with either ourselves individually going through it trying to figure it out, or just something that we deal with a lot in our respective professionals as counselor for JP and strength coach slash physical fitness slash also counselor person here unofficially, which is what a personal trainer basically.
I call coaches and massage therapists and hairdressers pseudo therapists. Like y'all ain't trained
There we go.
therapists, but you still end up kind of doing the job, you know?
That's a really good term because that's perfect. So, but again, this is something a lot of people go through. Everybody changes, life changes, the world around you changes, and there's lessons that we learn. But then at the same time, we don't want to base everything on the past because things could change going forward, and we don't want to accidentally again end up making the wrong decision with that. So before I just end up going on and on, I'm gonna let JP take over and explain it a little bit more.
All right, so this is one of the concepts that I really wish was taught in schools because it's useful to everybody. It's useful to people who want to make a personal change for themselves. It's useful for helping professionals who have to assist somebody in changing. It's helpful for parents. It's helpful for spouses. It's helpful for everybody. So honestly, like some of our talks, is kind of for specific people. This is kind of one of the ones for everybody. And my wish for you would be that you would actually memorize these and keep them forever, because this is actually useful for damn near every human being. But the idea is that human beings, as we attempt to change, whatever change we're going through, that goes through certain stages. And I'm going to list them off because they're reasonably self-explanatory, but there's some details that we want to dive into in each of them that is important. So the first stage is pre-contemplation, which is a fancy way of saying that a person is either not aware of a change they need to make, or they are not accepting or interested in that change. There's something that would make things better for them, but they are in some form or fashion not really at all ready for it. Then you get into the actual real stages, which start with contemplation. You start thinking about the change. You start thinking about like, oh, okay, maybe I should get fit. Maybe I should go see a counselor. Maybe I should go to college. Whatever it is, you start thinking about it, start intentionally doing a little bit of the calculus around it. Preparation. You start making things ready for the change to happen. Maybe you start budgeting and reallocating your time or your money. Maybe you know that you have to do something first. Like some people, if you want to get into the gym, but maybe you're in real bad health, you got to go to the doctor first. Make sure it's okay for you to go to the gym. All sorts of things that might go into the preparation phase. College, if you're going to college, you got to pick a college, you got to pick a major, you got to do a whole bunch of stuff. So that's a step that often gets shortened, is preparation. Action, well, okay, that's pretty self-explanatory. That's when you're actually working on the change and going through the time, energy, and effort of making it. Most people think that you just like you suddenly switch and now you've made the change, but in fact, the action step takes time. Then you got maintenance, which is where the changes become reasonably effortless. Not totally effortless, but reasonably effortless. And then the optional final step, which obviously we hope doesn't happen, but usually does in some way, relapse, where the change suddenly is no longer made and you have to go back through and troubleshoot something to get it back. And it can be a completely environmental relapse. Like maybe you you are going to the gym and the only gym in town closes. Well, the environment caused your relapse, caused you to not be able to sustain your change. Now you have to go back through and do more preparation, action, and maintenance. But oftentimes relapse is about our own mess ups and not about the environment messing us up. But so anyway, that's your stages of change. But now we're going to go through in some detail because there's some common ways people really mess up, either when they're making their own personal change or when they're trying to assist somebody else. Jerry always asks good questions. So before I just ramble, I'm going to let him kind of, because I saw him taking notes. come up with some examples and some ideas, and we'll just talk about those first.
Yeah. The what like you said, took some notes because I definitely didn't want to miss out on any of those. And sure enough, there is a specific question right here, and I was wondering where in those. So it's almost like 1 + 4 + 1 step. So you said the
Yeah.
pre-condensation, the four main ones, and then the optional relapse. But kind of when the change is not something that you plan on doing, like when it's either forced or accidental, where is it that people usually go with, like, find themselves in that? Do they go through a similar order, or do they kind of get shoved into one step in specific?
I've never thought of when a change is accidental. Maybe give me an example. Help me out with that.
Yeah, like I mean, the forced one is more is what I can think of. That would be, like somebody, like maybe you're still young, you're like a teenager, a kid, and you move. Like that wasn't your choice.
Oh,
Your parents are like, "Hey, we're moving," or you're suddenly unemployed, like you get fired, or something of that nature, or accidental. Accidental, not even
all
really
right,
sure.
let me grab onto the
Okay,
job one because that
yeah.
that's a great one. Because so okay, so the change. There's two changes. There's the change of lose job, which you're completely out of control of, and then there's the change of get new job, which you now have to be in control of. So probably you getting to skip the contemplation step. I don't think most people are gonna be sitting around being like, well,
Yeah.
paying rent is cool and everything, but do I really want to do that? So they're probably going to jump straight into preparation. Well, excuse me. No, that's not correct. Let me say what would be
I almost
ideal.
feel
And
like, I almost feel like that's it, but it's almost like you have to go through that like an acceptance first, some form of like not necessarily accept the end result, but accept that you suddenly are where you are, and it's going to be up to you to change it. That's kind of
yeah,
what I'm.
yeah, that's you're kind of noticing that the grief process happens right,
Right.
concurrently with stages of change. So you're absolutely right, but there's not the stage of change section of it. Is here's what would happen. Most people immediately jump into action
Oh, okay.
when it would be beneficial to take a day or two and work on preparation. Because most people immediately panic and the forced change, and they'll start trying to do action steps. But because they haven't gone through the preparation phase, those steps will be a little bit random. They'll be
Mhm.
kind of staccato and out of rhythm. And what would be more ideal in the job one is take some time, at least ask yourself a few good questions. This would be preparation. Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? Okay, let's say I was an accountant.
Yep.
Okay, do I want to keep being an accountant? Because now I've got options. Do I want to stay in this area? Do I want to, what do I want here? So that's some decent preparation. And then the questions of what do I need to do to then go to the place that I want. And then that helps define what actions you take. And what you'll notice if you start thinking through this lens is if people skip the preparation step, you'll notice that their actions and their wants are a lot of times disconnected, and they end up actually taking a lot of actions that are ineffective or at least not very efficient.
That makes a lot of sense, and is exactly what came to mind as you started talking about, was that taking the time, like, because I was, especially, with our roles as therapist and strength coach, I was actually thinking about that, like trying to help somebody else realize that that could be that chance to make a change. Because how often, and it makes sense, like you said, a lot of people go into action, which is crazy. Because I feel like when we go talk about later, that's going to be a step that holds a lot of people back. But I said a lot of people go into that reflexive action when something happens. How many people do you find automatically seeming to go back towards where they were? Like you said, they think too much, but how many people try to find, like, for example, like, to stay with the job and out, like, example, how many people seem to try to go back, like, right to where they were, like, not, the same thing, but immediately just try to find the same type of job, something like that, rather than like you said, trying to find a better situation, think about what they want. How many people just trying to go back to the familiar?
That's actually a perfect example, a very real example of what I was talking about. So let's say you lose your job as an accountant and you immediately start trying to find that exact same thing. And you haven't noticed yet that maybe that doesn't exist very well in your area. Maybe your area is small. Maybe there's only a couple. Maybe you were super highly paid as an accountant, and like you'd have to make partner again or something in a firm. You know, what a lot of people will do is they'll immediately try and get exactly like you said, right back to where they were, without realizing that maybe either that's not available, or they have to take 3 or 4 steps to get back there, or that they'll have to make some other personal change to get back there. Like maybe maybe you were grandfathered into some sort of program, but now you got to go get a new degree or something. And so that's exactly what I was saying about those inefficient or ineffective steps. People will try and get back to where they were and not realize that there's some problem with that they have to solve a different change before they can solve the job
Mhm.
change.
Yeah, like a sudden little like metaphor that came to me in that is I'd almost suggest to people just make sure you don't in trying to like I said fix a situation or pick yourself back up, however you're mentally looking at it. Don't accidentally sell your soul. It's like when you're doing it. I can see that being something that people, like I said, like especially if it is something, I mean, big, like you suddenly lose your income, it's a big one or whatever. Like said, don't accidentally lock yourself into a terrible situation and misery because you're being so reactive. Like preparation.
Actually, at the end, there's a perfect example of that we got to do. But we got to touch on the other stages first before we can do that. But there's a perfect example of exactly that.
Don't sell your soul. Example at end. All right. Okay, and then so with the accidental one, kind of thinking this would be more. I mean, like I mean, it could be an actual accident. Like everything, things are going well. Like let's say especially let's really look at somebody this would hurt a lot. Let's say it's like a single parent family or maybe dual family, but only one car, something like that. Things are okay. You're like upper lower class, lower middle class, whatever the hell you want to call it, but things are okay. Boom, you're in a car wreck or something. Just something like car stuff tends to stop life in its tracks for at least a day, if not longer, if it's an actual issue. But in those issues, they're like a literal accident. What's something that can like help people figure out like when it's a bigger struggle, not something they can fix in a day or two.
So the important question then becomes, because we're talking about stages of change, and each change has those stages. The important question, if we're going to do that, becomes what is the change that has to happen first? Is the change get a new car? Is the change, if people are injured, is the change like get medical treatment for like, you know, if you're a physical worker and you're in a bad car wreck and now you jacked up, like,
Yeah,
okay, now I've got to figure out what to do with my body before I can worry about going back to work. So it would really be about what is the change that needs to be made first. Then we can worry about going through the stages of that change. But the thing you've proposed is it'll have anywhere between, I don't know, 2 to 17 changes a person might have to navigate for those kind of catastrophic events.
yeah. What about so one more before we go back to like the main ones, the purposeful changes is when somebody goes through a change they didn't expect, they didn't see coming. Again, it's more external, like the ones we're talking about. Once they've been through it, are there any like particular types of tips or strategies you give to them to try to think about being better prepared or like for in case this happens again, either to possibly not let it happen or just anything like that so that the possibility is always there of a repeat, but more preparation for it?
Surprisingly, maybe not. It depends on how likely those kind of things are. Because statistically, we might recognize that a person would go through between 0 and 2 catastrophic car crashes in their lifetime. If you've already been through two, I mean, we're kind of like looking at the math and saying, well, okay, how likely is this again? Especially if they're getting on towards late life.
Right.
Uh, how much work do you need to do to worry about if this happens again? versus like, let's say you're 22 and you need to change jobs, and we kind of live in a world where you can expect to change jobs every 2 to 5 years. Hell yeah, we're going to talk about how to do this more efficiently and effectively next time, because you're
Yeah.
basically at 100% guaranteed that you're going to go through this change
Oh,
again.
that's a great point there. It's funny, before going to the main topic there, it's funny that you say that because like this is the time frame, summer is getting middle of the way through, and I'm starting to ask, some of the graduating high schoolers who are still here more questions about college, if they have a major, stuff like that. And it's funny because like every single one of them has their major picked out by now, something, and they say what they're planning on doing. If it's like, I'm doing this, but I'm really doing it for pre-law, or I want to do this and then I want to go to PT school, or maybe not, just I want to do this and then, just see what happens afterwards. But yeah, in my head, every single time I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I don't know the statistics on it, but I'm pretty positive the statistics lean more towards college students changing their major at least once. Like I said, I could be totally wrong, but I know it happens a lot.
You'd think I would know that one, but I actually don't know it either.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's like, I mean, half of us just conversation like to see where their heads at, but not that worried that they're going to change, because it's not like it's a big problem. It's like everybody does it. It's fine. Hopefully, they don't add any time and cost to their college experience. But otherwise, okay.
But let me say something important about that, because there's a good thing if we think stages of change. They've got a path, and you recognize like, oh, they're really dead set on this path. There's a change that could be coming that they're in complete pre-contemplation about, which is you might find out you need or want to change majors. It wouldn't be bad necessarily to just introduce the contemplation step of, hey, a lot of people find they need to change majors. Just do me a favor and think about a backup major. And then that's it. You're done. Because what you've done now is you've given them the first inch of contemplation.
Ooh, yeah, okay.
And you don't want to push that hard, because if somebody's in pre-contemplation, they're not going to move to action right now. But you can at least give them a little nudge. If you notice something that maybe they really need to be thinking about, you can give them the first step or two of contemplation for it.
I like that. Yeah. Now I feel bad. I'm like, man, I should have asked them that.
You say you should have known stages of change. Useful for everybody.
So when we are looking at those now, like, go right into it. So what does pre-contemplation look like for most people?
This one's easy because everyone knows somebody in pre-contemplation. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday. Hey, if your knee is hurting, you should go see my boy Nick for PT. And he was like, nah, I don't really need to do that. I was like, okay. And that's pre-contemplation. Every single one of us have had that, where we have identified, oh, this would be a really good idea for you. But that person has absolutely no belief in the usefulness of that change, or that applies to them, or something. That's pre-contemplation.
Any difference in whether that pre-contemplation / suggestion is positive or negative? Like if the person is kind of like not interested, or vice versa, the person's already sold on something and you're like, I don't know if that's a great idea. Like, have you noticed any difference in those two? Like, is one much stronger than the other?
Like when somebody has made a negative change. What do you mean?
Or not the change so much, but like you said, like, okay, that one would have been the person is in negative pre-contemplation. Nah, I'm okay. I don't need that. Versus if the person is like, hey, like I saw this thing over here, I'm gonna go check it out, or I'm gonna like, thinking about buying this or joining this club, and you're kind of like maybe something about it. You're like, I don't think that's going to be a great idea for you, man.
Oh, I see. I see. I never thought about that, but I would say that there's probably not much of a difference. And one of this is a good time to bring up. Um, you know, it's easy to overthink some psychology concepts. I would almost be nervous about overthinking it at that, like what's negative or positive pre-contemplation.
Yeah,
I think I'm
yeah,
just going to leave it as pre-contemplation.
yeah. I never thought about that because like I know there are. We've talked about before some ways where negative and positive things have a big difference. But I was wondering about that if somebody's like just automatically like, yeah, I think that's going to be a great idea versus, nah, I don't think I need that. If there's one way they're just like mentally wired to be like more into the other or not. So if you happen to notice, let me know.
We'll get into kind of how one piece of that happens with contemplation, since we're right at contemplation's doorstep anyway. One of the problems with people as intelligence increases, the desired time to spend in the contemplation step increases.
Ooh.
So you'll end up with all these people who are actually reasonably bright, completely failing to make useful changes because they end up in the contemplation step and they spend 40 years trying to optimize what their action step's going to be.
Dude, yeah, I can see that. Not that I'm sitting here being like, I am highly intelligent, but man, I know I've been through that type of thing so many times. And
I've
that
seen your
goes,
notebooks.
yeah, yes, that goes so hand in hand, almost inseparably from preparation. Like you said, like the two things almost inseparable in that aspect. Like if you contemplate enough to think about it, but then you try to find that perfect plan, and pretty much that whole, great is the enemy of good enough. Perfection is the enemy of good. Like, all those kind of different variations of things can be very, very easy for so many people to want to have that perfect plan that then they end up never actually doing it. But I don't want to get ahead on the list, but that's so I can see that.
Yeah, and what you'll notice is that when it comes to stages of change and contemplation, there's not an appreciable difference between an intelligent person and an anxious person because both of them have equal capability of envisioning potential negative outcomes. And so, in stages of change, a lot of times somebody who is non-anxious but intelligent will behave precisely like an anxious person because their ability to envision negative outcomes and their ability to attempt to predict the future is roughly similar, and so they'll both get stuck. The anxious person will get stuck in contemplation for envisioning negative outcomes, and so will the intelligent person. And half the time intelligent people are anxious anyway for that very reason. Like you'll notice highly intelligent people also have a tendency towards anxiety for that very reason.
Yeah. So with contemplation, I'm curious how some of the science kind of pans out with, especially behaviorally or cognitively. Is what would you say is what would be like good advice for a lot of people involving their gut instinct or thoughts about changing their initial instinct? Like, I'll give one example. I know that they say, well, I think, tell me, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty positive they say like conventional wisdom, I believe, says that if you take a test, let's say you think the answer C and you put C, and later you think about changing it, conventional wisdom says leave it alone. But I think the research is actually the other way around. Like the research actually says, no, if you're thinking about changing it later, that's probably actually the correct answer and you should go change it.
Uh, the trouble is there's studies that say both things.
Okay, I see that.
And that's I won't get on this soapbox for more than about 15 seconds, but that's a wonderful example of the difficulty of isolating variables and studying psychology, because we have a study that says don't change your answer. We've got a study that says do change your answer, or multiple ones of each. And what the hell is the variable that changed that got us different outcomes?
Yeah. I mean, that's spot on, and that's not to get on my soapbox either. That's the type of thing that actually drives me insane about even strength and conditioning and exercise research is to get a real outcome. Things have to be so controlled, and it's almost like congratulations, you've removed the real life experience for almost everybody to get anything out of this research. We were just talking about this in a staff meeting yesterday, where Paul brought up a study from 2019, a whopping 3 years ago, where researchers found that full range of motion squats were better for increasing muscle mass than half range of motion partial squats. I'm pretty positive you could have asked people who've been dead for decades, like, some of those old, like 1900 strongmen. Hey, what's better? Like, if you're really trying to build up my legs, like, should I do a full deep knee bend? Like they would have called it, or half, so it's like we would have been waiting until 2019. But anyway, so,
Yeah.
but yes, okay. But to go back, is there like fairly like common relationship with gut instinct in the contemplation stage, like, or if it's lasted a certain time or anything that for somebody to look into it more?
So, to the best of my knowledge, let's start with gut instinct has not been researched well enough for me to pretend expertise here. So this will be purely opinion and not like me speaking as a full expert. Um, I ascribe to the notion that our gut instinct is essentially our ability to rapidly produce predicted outcomes off of very, very, very small pieces of information. And that often at times happens behind the locked doors of our brain because of our conscious thought process gets involved. Then it will have a tendency to overthink stuff. It's one of the reasons that in a self-defense scenario, we almost always advise people that if you feel uncomfortable, you should leave. It's with the idea that you have detected something. It's impossible for you to tease out what you detected, but leave because statistically, your positive outcomes are going to far outweigh your negative outcomes from that. So when it comes to contemplation and state of change, that becomes difficult to answer because since all of the cognition on gut instinct is happening behind the locked doors, it's hard to offer any advice about that because we can't track what it is that the rapid cognition is figuring out. The nice thing is most changes don't require rapid cognition, and you can bring those things out to the conscious awareness and really mull them over. So I would say gut instinct is potentially useful in the contemplation stage of change, but should not be trusted nearly as much as it would be in something where you have to make decisions rapidly.
It makes sense. And okay, so actually taking that and then moving on into preparation. But something that makes me think about that is probably not actually related, but it's similar enough that it's came to my mind is, because they're not this isn't change involved, but the relationship between practice and repetition to ideally improve or master something, like especially like a skill, or just it can be musical skill, a sports skill, a play, everything like that. And there's like almost every field you look at, you'll notice most of the people talk about mastering the basics, things like that. And one of my favorite things that I've heard, I can't attribute it to one person, but as like don't practice enough until you get something right. Practice enough till you feel like you can't get it wrong. Like
Okay.
and again, like that's multiple, and there's the 100% thing is not really ever going to happen, but that type of feeling, that type of confidence that goes with it. I feel like similarly experience would be like that here. Like if you're somebody who maybe these changes are brand new, or you haven't gone through a lot of change, maybe it's just you've had a relatively comfortable life, and this is kind of one of your first times having to make a big decision for yourself. This stage, I feel like from contemplation to preparation, or maybe just the end of contemplation, I'll call it, probably seems way more insurmountable than somebody who's gone through several changes and is at least accustomed to going through the process. Even if it's a new situation for them, if you're somebody who's handled just again adversity, a lot of things changing in their life, I feel like your strength or your skill set in a way to get you through this probably feels stronger and more confident, whether you think about it or not, than somebody who's brand new to it.
Yeah, and that's definitely true because to move from contemplation to preparation, you have to believe the change is possible. And
Okay.
for the person who's been through many changes, especially of a similar vein, it's very easy for you to imagine that it's possible. Like, take serial entrepreneurs, for example. You start up one business, you realize that, like, oh, I understand this process. Now I start like five more businesses. The first one seems huge, but then once you get experience with it, it doesn't seem nearly so big anymore. Whereas the person who's deciding, should I start a business? if they can't decide that it's possible for that to go well, they'll never move to preparation.
That that's awesome. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, and it goes right with the idea of trying to do or overcome just hard things or uncomfortable things, so that you basically are working that muscle in
Yep.
that way, just like you said. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's say you decided it's possible and you're in preparation. Like, what are some ways to help people get through that, or help yourself kind of realize what to do? I feel like, okay, like, you already said one of them I know earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and point that one out. And that was, you decide which one's most important first. I'm going to assume that that's the most important one. Or
Yes, absolutely.
okay,
But preparation is a little tricky. I'm really glad you asked that question in that way, because it's kind of like, you have students at your gym. You have interns, right?
yeah,
Uh, well, you tell them when their internship starts, and you tell them when it's over. See, preparation is kind of like an internship where you have to decide when it starts, and you're not really sure when it's over. You just have to kind of decide to escape. Uh,
yes, there we go.
and that's what the preparation step is, because you'll never be fully prepared, 100%. That's just out. And it's also very easy to be underprepared. But if I was going to try and say, here is how you know you're at the right level of preparedness, I don't know that I could do that, except talking to each individual person about each individual change. Like, I can help an individual assess that at that level. But man, if I'm going to come up with bullet points for a group of people, I would struggle mightily to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think that part is huge. Said have an exit plan. That is what you said is basically called. Is when you go into it, decide to have that exit plan. Either have an exit plan or know how it's going to go. Like you said, then that's great, because I can tell you right now that is something that I have been terrible at in the past. Is I am such a forward planner and start at the beginning and build upwards. But I said this is just one of those lessons I've learned through my life, is get that best case scenario, or a lot of times I'll plan under a worst case scenario, but it's still a worst case scenario that goes well. I'll plan as like, this is the worst case of it happening. Is it worth it? That's kind of how I'll think of a lot of stuff through it. But it took me a while to learn about actually planning my exit, both a good exit or a bad exit. I feel like you need both, or at least it would help. Like I said, like if things go wrong, this is how I'm going to escape, or if things are going well and correctly, nevertheless, this is how I want it to end, or this is what I like. An escape in that case could just be moving on to the next thing.
Well, and you said something valuable there, that I said, I would struggle mightily to come up with some bullet points to know you're done with the preparation phase, but maybe you suggested a part of one, which is being able to know, like, let's say I'm trying to decide, am I done with preparation? If I'm able to ask myself, what else would I need to know or do or plan for or set up in order to think this has a good chance of going well? Not a perfect chance of going well, of course. Uh, because if I can't name anything, I might be done with preparation. I might be as prepared as possible, because if I'm, gonna, I mean, let's do the one we just did, start a business. Okay, what else do I need to know to make sure this goes well? And I come up empty. Well, now where can I go for preparation? That's it. I'm done,
Yeah.
because I cannot figure out anything more to prepare. I now am forced to either just say I am not making this change and go back to pre-contemplation, or I'm forced into the action step. So yeah,
I love that.
maybe that was a good heuristic.
Yeah. I think like going right with that. Yeah. A big part of it is, like you said, identifying variables that are going
Mhm.
to be involved, or that at least you have an idea about, and then figuring out, like you said, like at least trying to see if, like, what is good, bad, or nothing. What is a realistic, like, time frame, but ideally a minimal and a maximal one, kind of. And then, like I said, what goes. For example, thinking about fitness and training, or like nutrition for one. Nutrition's a hard one, because so many people struggle making nutritional changes. One of the biggest reasons for that is, so many people, when they do that, they try to change everything. They try to go immediately into this like defined black and white plan or change. So one, that's behaviorally difficult because it's so many things, but it also makes it harder to tell what is actually working for you, because you just changed every variable, or at least a lot of them. So a lot of times when I'm telling people that are trying to do something, whether it's again gain weight, lose weight, lose burn fat, whatever it is, have more energy, is I try to convince people to only change one thing and give it a few weeks and see what happens. And in some cases, change is a sign. Change is a sign, period. But in some cases, no change is a sign. Like using like with nutrition, like metabolism is a very adaptable thing inside of your body. How, you know, how much energy your body gets from the food it creates. So that's ultimately how many calories you burn plus your activity. If you want to lose weight, and I feel as a professional you're not eating enough though, or let's say you're an athlete and I feel you're not eating enough, and I'll really try to get you to eat more calories, 300, 500 more calories, something that won't be a huge amount in one day. But if you do this every day, it'll make a difference. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, if you're still
Which I'm betting they're in pre-contemplation about.
right, yeah. If they're in if 2, 3 weeks later you're still at the same body weight and you've been eating consistently 300 to 500 more calories a day, guess what? That lack of change, that visible lack of change, just told us that your metabolism sped up because you are actually eating, because you did change, but at the beginning by eating more calories, and thus, hey, look, we sped this up.
So you're suggesting something, and I definitely intended to bring this up because I happened to catch a video maybe a day or two ago by James Clear, who I know you know. But for those who don't, he wrote this book called Atomic Habits, which I haven't read, but I've listened to the man talk, and he seems to have some good ideas.
Oh, good.
And one of the things he was saying that I thought was particularly clever. So I don't know if I quizzed him if he'd be able to list the stages of change, but I can tell he intuitively grasps them because you're suggesting something similar to what he did, which is you can help people through the stages of change by giving them behaviors that will help them with the steps a little bit. So the one that you
Yeah.
just gave was, okay, you're not ready for adding in 1,500 calories. Let me give you a much smaller number so that you can see this won't impact anything, and then thus enter contemplation about adding another 1,500 calories. And then like, oh, okay, now we can start working on the change. And he was talking about a similar thing. He was talking about if people wanted to start going to the gym, is he would say, okay, go to the gym, but you're not allowed to stay more than 10 minutes.
I remember that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as soon as he said that, I was like, oh, okay, this is a stages of change thing because he's making sure that a person can't try to get into the action step on like a billion things at once. He's getting them into the action step on get into the gym. And then he's helping them be in contemplation about like, okay, do I want to be here more than 10 minutes? If I was going to be here more than 10 minutes, how might I do that? And he's not saying any of that to his client or whoever he's advising, but he's letting that natural process occur. So I thought it was very clever. Even if he doesn't know stages of change, he's clearly got a grasp on the concept, uh, and using the behaviors to make those stages happen. I thought was a clever addition.
That's good. Mm-hmm. I took some more notes, but I think they're better suited for later. So preparation, like I said, you prepared enough. Hopefully, you realize what's good, what's bad. Gave yourself a realistic time frame. Action.
All right, now this is important because I have run into this so many times. So action is making the change, and action is troubleshooting the change as it's occurring. So
Nice. Yes.
basically, like we've got our accountant who got fired, and he's on the action step. Okay, get new job, and he's not getting any new jobs. And part of the action step is troubleshooting that as it's happening. Trying to make the nutritional change. And oh man, for some reason, every time I pass by Cold Stone, I can't like not go in and get ice cream. That's fine. You're still on the action step. We're just troubleshooting this part of the change. But a lot of people envision that, like, if they have to troubleshoot any damn thing whatsoever, they've failed at the action step and they're just a miserable loser.
Mm.
And you know, if I had to like just beat the drum on anything, it would be the action step is also just troubleshooting what is going on when it's not perfect immediately. That's part of the action step.
I think something to really try to point out then to yourself or to other people is realizing what a I don't want to say like realistic because that's not what I'm talking about, but realizing what success rate would actually be like life changing or give you your goal. Like it may be one time. Like if it's the case of like said a fired accountant, you need to be at least right now you need to be successful one time in getting that new job you want. So even if you get rejected 13 times early on, it's not like you suddenly have to try to hit 13 wins in a row to bat 50%. You need one. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff like that where it like with a lot of changes, you only need one. Whereas if we're talking more health and fitness and something is more habitual and consistent, if you're seeing that like, man, I just keep falling off my diet, it's like, okay, maybe like again, if it's one day, just you can try again. But if this happens 3 weeks in a row, you're struggling, like making no progress, like, okay, let's look at a little bit easier, smaller change, like you said, that smaller, maybe it's like that simply remove soda, what like the only 10 minutes at the gym, whatever it is, that what is that smallest change that we can make that is still going to count and stick.
Mm-hmm.
But it's,
Yep.
I,
Like seeing if you can build the system around the struggle point. Like that's exactly why at least 75% of fitness, nutrition, and diet plans out there have some version of cheat day because it's just much more efficient to build that into the system and say that's not a failure rather than try and
Mhm.
like really make people stick to it 100%. Sticking to it 80%, if it's good enough, we call that the success and move on.
So action, at what point would you like would this action in essence become maintenance slash also relapse planning? I mean, I feel like they're kind of almost it's all one line, so to speak. But how would you actually differentiate these for people?
So maintenance is not a thing you stay in forever. You kind of flip back and forth between action and maintenance as stuff happens. So you know, let's do our easiest example with like gym stuff. I show up at the gym automatically. That's just, you know, on these days and at this times, this is when I show up, and that section is in maintenance. But I always have to pay a little attention to something. Maybe I'm not working out as intensely as I should, and that moves from maintenance back to action. Like now I have to pay a little more attention to it and troubleshoot it some to get it back there. You know, maybe I don't know, some change, and now like one of my gym days disappears, and now I have to go to action to troubleshoot to get it back to maintenance. A lot of people envision that they get to maintenance and that like there's trophies and prizes for staying in maintenance forever.
Hmm.
And that's not the case. You functionally can't stay in maintenance forever. You stay in maintenance as long as you can and make it as easy as you can for as long as you can, but without the idea that that lasts forever. You always have to troubleshoot.
Example that came to mind was people that I've seen, thankfully not here, but I've seen before people who'd come to the gym and do the exact same workout literally every day for years. I remember seeing that when I was growing up. And again, it's like you said, like you're achieving at least maintaining that literally staying the same. So if your goal is simply to stay active, get your blood moving, stuff like that, like you're going to maintain a level of fitness by doing that. But if you want to actually change your fitness and improve it, it needs to go to that action step and more so. And actually, I feel like part of that, like step one of maintenance, so there to me would be in essence keep it going, but then step two is being more is like in staying intentional about what you really want out of it. Like, are you happy with what it's at, or do you want to make it better? Do you want to keep it a certain standard? And so just putting that intentional effort or things you're doing, like you said, just making sure you're going as hard as you want to at the gym
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
Yeah, and especially with certain with let's call them growth goals, like career goals or fitness goals, or anything where it's more ideal to just be like pushing just a little further. Um, it's good to set goals if we continue thinking stages of change where you can be in maintenance, but it's a little tough to be in maintenance. So, for example, give you a great one. One of my lift goals is to be able to just deadlift 2 times my body weight any day I walk into the gym. Like if I decide, oh, today I'm going to do it, and I warm up and I can do it. That's a goal that, at my size and fitness level, would not be terrifically difficult to maintain, but it would be difficult enough that some days I'm going to go in and I'm going to try it and I'm going to miss the lift. I'm going to be like, oh, time to go back to action step and work on this until I get it back up. And it's just a little hard to stay there. Same thing with any other type of growth goal. A lot of people don't want to have to be in action forever because that seems exhausting to them. Some people are built differently where they can just be in action forever and it's fine. But most people, it would be good to set their goals where it's like maintenance is possible but difficult, and they'll have to slip back to action on a somewhat regular basis, and that feels less strenuous to them.
See, we're definitely running along here, so I'm trying to get through. No, I mean it's awesome. Like, it'd be impossible to go through this talk though, and we wouldn't be doing a disservice if did not mention like how as you get through this, especially action maintenance, turning things into habits and having that focus, like and having discipline when you need it to keep the action going or maintenance would how important those things would ideally be part of the plan of most plans if it's applicable. We've had conversations on that. We don't need to go into that, but I need to say the words habit and discipline while we're here. So one thing, so this again, like curious about this one is what type of advice would you give to somebody either ahead of time or on the spot or to yourself, could be self-advice, to either prepare or to simply navigate when emotional changes come up, like plan to the plan. Okay, so probably one of the most emotional things that people out there react to, if you're involved in it, is investing. I have my plan. I know what stocks I have. I know long term the market does this, and you have your money there. Recession hits, so the market tanks. Again, this is part of all the data you looked at. You're like, okay, I don't plan on needing the money, but oh crap, it's tanking. I kind of want to sell. Like just that type of reaction. Like, hey, you're thinking you have like an emotional response right now. Don't do it.
Stop having that emotion.
Like, just somebody who has that, like, again, they have the plan, but something makes them want to like react to it rather than stick with the plan.
So this pans back one step out because really what's being asked here is, I'm having an emotional response. Do I need to make a change? And your example of investing is a good one, but this can apply to all kinds of stuff. This can apply to grief. This can apply to trauma. This can apply to just the Red Sox instead of the Yankees won the series. Like anything you can have emotions about. The first question to ask is, okay, I'm having emotion. Does that mean I need to make a change? Usually the answer is no. Or if the answer is yes, usually it means that the change is I need to deal with my emotion better instead of I need to make a behavioral change around this thing I'm having emotions about. So that sense of like some of wrongness, at least question, at least say, okay, do I need to make a change? If I need to make a change, what would it be? Like your investing example. Oh my God, the markets are down. What should I do? Well, I guess you can sell everything at a loss, but is that really the change you need to make? Like that's probably not good. So really it's just the yes, no question of, do I need to make a change first? And then if yes, what might that change be? Because usually if you answer yes, and then you say, what would that change be? And then you come up with nothing. It's like, oh, actually there is not a change. I just want there to be because I'm having emotions and I don't like my emotions right now.
So like, oh, I want the market to just go up.
Yeah, I'll just do that.
So okay, so is there anything you really wanted to touch on relapse specifically?
Only that it is not a thing to worry about. It will happen. Period. Sometimes it'll happen because of a big event in your life. Sometimes it'll happen just because you lost track of what you cared about. Sometimes it'll happen because you go through a depression, or some other like internal event. Sometimes you'll just lose. Let's take any of these examples: running a business or your career, or being in the gym. Sometimes you just lose interest in what you're doing.
Well,
Uh,
I feel like if you can, this is like your example just a few minutes ago too, where if you can almost work it in, like I said, not a relapse, but like you said, like the cheat day, something like that. Yeah, if you can almost work that in, like whether it's or a vacation business wise, or I mean, there's a lot of instances you obviously couldn't work it in, but if you can almost do it, I can see where that would make it a lot more feasible to get through, because then you just know it. You already have it planned on the at the end of the relapse to get back up.
mhm. Yeah. Well, and a lot of times the change is just regaining interest in the thing. So like if you're 35 years into a 40-year career and you're getting ready to retire and you're like, man, if I can just stick this out 5 more years, this is going to be so much better for me in a lot of ways. The change would be, and the thing you would try and move away from the relapse on is regaining enough interest and energy for my career to stick it out that last 5 years. Uh, but a lot of times the relapse is much more um, short term, which is I stopped going to the gym, I stopped doing my counseling homework, and suddenly I'm in a depression again. And really, it's just, hey, you relapsed, back to preparation, figure out what you need to do, back to action, do the stuff and troubleshoot it, get back to maintenance. People will make huge, huge deals about relapse in their head. It's not a huge deal. It's going to happen at least half the changes you make.
Love it.
Before we move to the end, remember I said there was that one
Yep.
example I had after
Yeah.
we went through all the stages of change. Oh, good, good, good. So there is a very common cultural example of not going through the stages of change. Well, actually, there's probably like half a dozen, but I'm going to go through one of the ones many people are familiar with. Uh, for a lot of young people, going to college ends up being an example of not going through the stages of change well. You gave examples of people going through it well, but how many people do we know who graduated with college with a ton of debt and a degree they don't use?
Mhm.
What happens is a lot of people just come up with the idea of, I'm going to go to college because my friends are, because my parents told me to, or because society says that's the best way to success or whatever. But no contemplation happened. No contemplation of uh, what thing do I want to study and why do I want to study it? Am I interested in it? Can I make a lot of money at it? Do I envision myself taking it to a graduate degree? Like what is my purpose for doing this? No preparation. How am I going to pay for it? How am I going to like what's going to be my during school plan? Like, am I going to work during school? Am I going to live off of loans? How is that going to impact my studies, if at all? Is that going to impact my long-term plan of what I want to do with my degree? They go straight from pre-contemplation to action. Take loans, show up at college, do some stuff, party. Maybe they study sometimes. Maybe they don't get a degree. Maybe they don't. And so it's action, but it's ineffective and inefficient action. And then they get out and they got a ton of debt, and maybe they realize, shoot, I wanted to be a carpenter all along. I just used up 4 years that I didn't really need to do. It's a wonderful example and a terrible example at the same time of a societally approved abandonment of going through the stages of change in a logical, rational way.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say to that because like that's so spot on. It's and just like you said, it's people going into it like when that happens. I feel like most of the time it's people going into it as I'm going to have free time or time to myself, but like I said, without thinking that it's like okay, this at some point this has some sort of cost and consequence. It might be money, it might not be. You might be lucky and it's not. But if nothing else, the cost is time. And what else happens in that time? Like you said, like do you come out of this completely confused with no
Mm-hmm.
direction? Do you have a ton of debt? Worse, who knows? So
And an important thing to say at the tail end of that, that's not uh, due to the stupidity of anybody like that accidentally followed that model. This is the exact reason I really wish stages of change was taught in school and hammered into people and people had it memorized. because if people knew how to think through this, it would be so much easier to avoid those societal traps that people don't think about and don't notice until too late.
What's crazy is like, yeah, as we've talked about it, I honestly feel like this would be the type of thing that you could literally write about. Like, even though we're talking about like big things and like I said, life things, I feel like if you turn this into an actual exercise, you could do it. You could literally take out a notebook and be like, all right, because I mean, pre-contemplation is the fact that you took out the notebook and are going to do this. It's like you said, it's like, okay, like let me contemplate this now. It's like, like pros and cons. Why do I want to do this? Stuff like that. And then yeah, you could literally write, at least until you get to action, and even then you could give yourself steps. Like, you could literally write this out. So many things we talk about are not type of things where you can do that, like treat it like a school assignment. You could do this like a school.
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, now that you're
Yeah,
saying that, I feel like I might make one. I might make a worksheet or a
old
workbook for
school
my
worksheet,
clients like this.
gold stars, man, gold stars. Boom. So, all right, man, had a great time talking with you.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah, I said I feel like time flew by. But man, so yeah, we got a lot more good topics coming up. I know, like we like the ones we got scheduled for July and even there in early August. So we'll be back here in a couple of weeks. Hope you guys got something out of this. Thank you to those guys who were watching, tuned in. Again, anybody you know or think that can get something out of this, feel free to share it. Let them know about us. And
Get them out of pre-contemplation.
exactly. So, all right, guys. See you later.
See y'all.